The mountain was quiet, almost too quiet. Mist curled around the jagged rocks like ghostly fingers, and the wind whispered secrets that no one could hear. High above the valley, in a cave hidden from the eyes of ordinary travelers, the ancient dragon lay still. His scales were dull and deep scars ran along his massive body. His golden eyes, once bright and full of fire, were now half closed, heavy with pain. The dragon's breaths came slowly, each one a struggle, and the cave smelled of smoke and old battles. For centuries, this dragon had been the guardian of the mountains. He had seen empires rise and fall, humans come and go, and dragons fight each other over pride and power. But now he was alone, fading into silence. No one dared approach him. Stories had spread among humans and creatures alike. The dragon was dying, and whoever came near would face his wrath. Yet none remembered that long ago, the dragon had protected even the smallest, weakest creatures when danger came. His pride had grown with his age, but his kindness was still buried somewhere deep inside. At the base of the mountain, a small village slept under the soft glow of lanterns. Among the villagers was Lyra, a human girl of 14, with curious eyes and a brave heart. She had grown up listening to stories of the ancient dragon. Some villagers feared him, calling him the mountain terror, while others whispered that he was wise and noble. Lyra felt a different pull. She was not like the other children. She wanted to see the truth, not just hear tales. She wanted to know the dragon, not as a monster but as a being who had lived for 1,000 years. That morning Lyra packed a small bag. She put bread, water, and a notebook inside. She did not carry a sword or a weapon. She did not want to fight. She wanted to talk, to sit, and to listen. The villagers watched her leave, shaking their heads. "It is dangerous," they said. "No human can survive near him." Lyra only smiled softly. "I must try," she whispered. "I must see him with my own eyes." The climb was treacherous. Rocks were slippery from the morning mist, and the wind howled like the dragon's old enemies. Her legs ached and her hands were cut by sharp stones. Yet she continued, step by step, driven by curiosity and courage. The higher she went, the colder it became, and the mist thickened, hiding the world below. She felt like she was leaving everything behind, the warmth of her village, the comfort of the familiar, but a strange excitement burned in her chest. The dragon waited above, and she did not know if he would greet her with fire or silence. Finally she reached the cave. It was enormous, stretching deep into the mountain, with walls covered in ancient carvings. The carvings showed dragons flying across the skies, humans bowing in respect, battles fought long ago, and treasures guarded by claws. Lyra's heart pounded as she stepped inside. The cave was dim, lit only by shafts of sunlight that filtered through cracks in the rocks. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars, and the silence pressed around her like a heavy blanket. In the deepest part of the cave lay the dragon. He did not stir at first. His chest rose slowly and his eyes remained half closed. Lyra's breath caught. He was enormous, larger than any creature she had ever seen. His scales shimmered faintly in the light, colored like burnished gold and faded green. His wings, folded against his sides, were like mountains themselves. And yet, he seemed fragile, as if a single touch might break him. Lyra took a small step forward. She felt fear, yes, but also a strange calm. She sat on a smooth rock, a little distance from the dragon, and looked at him carefully. She said nothing at first, only watched. She noticed the smoke that rose in thin trails from his nostrils, the way his tail lay still, and the gentle rhythm of his breathing. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes passed and the dragon did not move. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Hello. I am Lyra. I want to sit with you." The dragon's eye flicked open. It was a deep golden eye, filled with age, sorrow, and pain. For a moment, Lyra thought he might roar, chase her away, or breathe fire. But he did nothing. He only watched, slowly, quietly, with the weight of centuries in his gaze. Lyra felt her heartbeat race, but she did not move. She just stayed there, still and silent, letting the dragon see that she meant no harm. Hours passed. Lyra told small stories about her village, about her friends, about the animals she loved, and the sky she watched at night. She spoke softly, not trying to wake the dragon, not trying to command him. She just spoke like the wind carries whispers. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dragon's chest rose a little higher with each breath. A faint warmth spread through the cave. He had not moved, but something inside him had stirred. Outside, the wind howled and clouds moved quickly across the sky. Inside the cave, time seemed different. Here, life and death, past and present, mixed together in silence. Lyra did not notice the cold or the fear, She only noticed the dragon, his massive form, his quiet strength, and his pain. She did not know why she felt so connected to him, only that she could not leave. At night, the dragon opened both eyes fully. He turned his massive head slightly, not threatening but curious. He watched Lyra as she closed her notebook and sat with her hands folded. She felt no fear, only a deep sense of trust, as if the dragon understood that she was not like the others. She had come to him not to fight, not to steal, but to share a story and a moment. The dragon let out a low rumble, almost like a sigh. Lyra smiled gently. "I will stay as long as you want," she whispered. "I will not leave." And for the first time in centuries, the ancient dragon felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt that perhaps, just perhaps, he was not entirely alone. The cave remained silent, but a new bond had begun. One of hope, of curiosity, and of courage. The dragon watched the human girl and she watched him. Neither moved for a long time, but the story of their meeting began, quietly, like a spark waiting to catch fire. In the distance, a shadow moved across the mountains. Danger, perhaps, or a traveler lost. But inside the cave, the dragon's slow, steady breathing and Lyra's soft voice filled the space. A story was beginning and life, fragile but stubborn, had returned to the ancient dragon. The morning sun barely touched the cave entrance when Lyra opened her eyes. The dragon lay still, but she could see a faint rise and fall in his chest. He was breathing more evenly than yesterday. A small warmth, like a faint glow, seemed to radiate from him. Lyra felt encouraged. She carefully picked up her notebook and began to speak. "I will tell you a story," she said softly. "It is about my village. About people who are not strong but who are brave in small ways." The dragon shifted slightly, turning his massive head toward her. His golden eyes focused on her, curious. Lyra smiled nervously, but she did not stop. She began to speak of her village, describing the small wooden houses, the gardens filled with flowers and vegetables, and the laughter of children playing in the streams. She told him about the baker who always shared bread with those who had none, the blacksmith who fixed broken tools for free, and the teacher who stayed late to help children learn. The dragon's eyes softened. The rise and fall of his chest grew steadier. It was as if her words carried warmth and hope into the deep, cold corners of his heart. He had lived through wars, betrayals, and losses. He had seen humans commit terrible acts, but he had also seen kindness in long-forgotten memories. Lyra's voice reminded him of that. As she spoke, Lyra noticed scars on the dragon's scales, deep, jagged lines where weapons had cut him. Some were old, others newer. She wondered what stories they held. Without thinking, she spoke aloud, "You must have been brave once. You must have fought for something you loved." The dragon rumbled softly, a sound that shook the small stones near his claws. It was not anger, it was acknowledgement. He had fought, yes, for centuries. He had fought to protect his kin, his land, and even humans he barely knew. His pride had grown too strong and it had cost him. But Lyra's words seemed to reach him in a way that no one else had for hundreds of years. Lyra continued. She told him about her own courage, about times she had helped sick animals, rescued a child from a river, or climbed a steep cliff to bring medicine to someone in need. She did not exaggerate, she spoke simply, honestly. She hoped the dragon would understand that even small acts could carry great power. Hours passed and the dragon remained quiet, listening. At first he only breathed, his massive form still as stone. But slowly he began to lean slightly closer, his head lowering as if he wanted to hear more. Lyra smiled, though she did not move closer. She knew that trust must grow slowly. She kept her voice gentle, weaving tales of hope, courage, and love that humans often shared with one another. At one point she told the dragon about a storm that had hit her village last year. The river had flooded, houses were destroyed, and animals had run wild in fear. The villagers had worked together, carrying food, building temporary shelters, and helping one another until the storm passed. She emphasized the bravery and teamwork of ordinary people, the way kindness could overcome fear. The dragon rumbled again, louder this time. A small flame flickered at the edge of his mouth, not enough to burn, but enough to show life returning to his body. Lyra's heart leapt. She had not expected such a response so quickly. She leaned back, giving him space, and continued her stories. "You see," she said, "even small humans can make a difference. Even one person can change the world in ways others cannot imagine. Maybe you understand that too." For a long time there was no reply. Only the sound of the dragon's steady breathing and the soft wind outside the cave. Then the dragon's massive head moved slightly closer, so close that Lyra could feel the warmth of his breath. She did not flinch. Instead, she continued to speak, telling him of dreams humans had, dreams of peace, of discovery, of friendship with creatures once thought enemies. As she spoke, she noticed faint glimmers along the dragon's scales. They were like tiny sparks of life, flowing slowly through his body. His eyes, golden and ancient, seemed to shine brighter, and his tail twitched slightly. Something inside him had awakened. He had listened for centuries, but no one had ever spoken with such care, such hope to him before. The dragon made a sound almost like a sigh, and for a moment, Lyra thought he might speak. But no words came. Instead, he shifted, lifting his massive head fully and stretching his wings just slightly. It was not a show of strength or threat. It was a gesture of awakening, a sign that life had returned to him. Lyra smiled softly. She knew this was only the beginning. She also realized something important. Stories had power. They could heal, inspire, and change even the oldest, most stubborn hearts. If a human girl could reach a dragon, perhaps she could reach others too, in ways that brute force never could. As the sun climbed higher, Lyra and the dragon sat together. She told him of small joys, the sound of birds at dawn, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of friends, the colors of the sky at sunset. Each story, simple and honest, seemed to feed something inside him, like water to a parched riverbed. Even when fatigue pressed on her eyelids, Lyra did not stop. She told stories of kindness, bravery, and dreams, letting her voice carry through the cave like a gentle wind. The dragon remained still but alive, his chest rising and falling with increasing strength. Finally, as evening approached, Lyra closed her notebook. She looked at the dragon, her eyes full of hope. The dragon, massive and ancient, looked back at her with something new in his gaze, curiosity, trust, and perhaps the faintest spark of gratitude. "You are not like the others," the dragon rumbled softly. His voice was deep, shaking the cave, but it carried no threat. Lyra nodded. "I am human," she said simply. "And I believe even humans and dragons can understand each other, if we try." The dragon made a small rumbling sound that could have been a laugh or a sigh. He lowered his massive head slightly, close to her, but careful not to scare her. For the first time in centuries, he let a human sit beside him, not as a threat, not as prey, but as a companion. Outside, the wind howled and the mountains remained silent. Inside, life had returned. Slowly, steadily, the ancient dragon began to recover. And the girl, small and brave, realized that the greatest power was not in fire or strength, but in stories, courage, and hope. The night fell, covering the cave in shadows, but the bond between them grew stronger. The dragon's breathing was steady, his eyes no longer dull but bright with ancient wisdom. Lyra knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now they had found something rare: trust, friendship, and the first spark of survival. The next morning the cave was quiet, but it felt different. The dragon moved slowly, lifting his massive head and stretching his wings. The sunlight caught on his scales, making them shine like burnished gold. Lyra watched in awe. She could feel the energy in the cave, a strange warmth that had not been there before. It was as if the dragon's life had returned not just in his body, but in his spirit. Lyra took a deep breath. "Good morning," she said softly. "Did you sleep well?" The dragon's golden eyes met hers, and for a moment she thought she could see understanding there. He tilted his head slightly, making a low rumbling sound. It was not a roar, but a sound that carried meaning. Lyra smiled. She had read in her books that dragons could speak with feelings, not just words. Perhaps he was curious. "I will tell you another story," she said, opening her notebook. "This one is about dreams and courage." The dragon listened. Lyra began to speak of humans who had faced great dangers with only hope and cleverness. She told of a fisherman who saved a child from a stormy sea, of a shepherd who protected his village from wild beasts using only his wits, and of a small girl who once calmed a fierce wolf by singing to it. As she spoke, the dragon leaned closer, his massive head almost touching the stone floor beside her. Slowly, the dragon lifted a claw, then another, stretching them out as if to feel her presence. Lyra did not move away. She had learned that patience was important with creatures like him. She continued to tell stories, adding details of friendship, kindness, and bravery. Then something unexpected happened. A faint light glowed along the dragon's scales, moving like a slow river of energy. Lyra gasped. She had never seen anything like it. The dragon rumbled, deep and low, and the sound filled the cave. It was as if her words had awakened something ancient inside him. "You feel it too," Lyra whispered, touching her chest. "The bond, it is real." The dragon's head lowered further, almost as if he was bowing. Lyra realized he was trying to communicate. Slowly, in deep rumbles and small gestures, he began to show curiosity about her stories. He seemed to understand in a way that went beyond words. She could see the intelligence in his eyes, the way he remembered things from long ago and connected them with her tales. As the day passed, the cave became a place of quiet learning. Lyra spoke and the dragon listened. He moved slightly, curling his tail around a stone pillar, stretching his wings when he felt stronger. Occasionally he would make soft sounds and Lyra learned to respond, nodding or smiling. Each time the bond grew stronger. She realized that communication did not need words. It needed patience, trust, and care. By afternoon the dragon was moving more freely. He stood on all four legs, his head high, and the glow along his scales grew brighter. Lyra climbed onto a safe rock nearby, speaking to him as if he were a friend. She told him stories of humans who had befriended creatures far larger and stronger than themselves. She explained that courage was not just about fighting, it was about understanding and helping others. The dragon rumbled, softly, almost like he was agreeing. Then carefully he lowered his massive head and allowed Lyra to touch his snout. Her small hand felt the warmth of his scales, rough but alive. A thrill ran through her body. She had touched an ancient being who had lived for centuries, a creature stronger than any human could imagine. And yet he trusted her. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the cave entrance, carrying with it the scent of other dragons. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The dragon stiffened, his eyes narrowing. He had not heard another dragon in many years. The scent was familiar but dangerous. Lyra sensed tension in his body. He growled softly, a warning. "Are they coming?" she whispered. The dragon tilted his head, sniffing the air. His eyes glowed brighter and Lyra could feel his muscles tense, ready for anything. She realized that the bond they had formed was more than friendship. It was a connection that allowed them to sense danger together. The dragon was no longer alone, and she was no longer afraid, even though a threat might be near. Hours passed and no other dragons appeared. The dragon relaxed slightly, curling his tail around himself. Lyra sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his scales. She continued to speak, softly, telling him stories of humans who had survived against all odds, who had worked together to overcome impossible challenges. Each story seemed to strengthen him, and the glow along his scales grew brighter and steadier. By evening, the dragon moved in a way that surprised Lyra. He lifted one massive wing and stretched it fully. Then he let out a deep rumble, louder than before but not threatening. It was a sound of life, of strength returning. Lyra felt a thrill of excitement. The dragon was healing not just physically but emotionally. Her stories, her courage, her belief in him had awakened something ancient and powerful. "You are strong," she whispered. "But you are not alone anymore. We are together now." The dragon's eyes softened, golden and deep. He lowered his head, and Lyra placed her hand gently on his snout again. She felt a pulse of warmth, like a heartbeat, connecting them. She understood that the bond they had formed was rare, something that could change both their lives forever. Night fell, covering the cave in darkness. Stars shone faintly through the cracks in the mountain walls. Lyra and the dragon remained close, speaking without words, listening without speaking. The bond had grown beyond stories. It was a connection of trust, understanding, and shared strength. As she lay on a rock near him, Lyra realized something important. The dragon was no longer just an ancient creature fading into silence. He was alive, awake, and aware. And together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Deep in the mountains beyond the cave, shadows moved. Another dragon clan might be nearby, sensing the awakening of their ancient kin. Lyra shivered slightly, but the dragon shifted, his massive body shielding her. The bond between them gave her courage. She knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The night was silent, except for the dragon's slow, steady breathing and Lyra's soft voice, whispering stories to keep the bond alive. It was not just survival, it was the beginning of something new. Something that could change the world not through fear or fire, but through courage, hope, and understanding. By the time the first light of dawn touched the cave, the dragon was fully awake, his massive body strong and alive. His golden eyes glowed with life, and the faint river of light along his scales flowed steadily. Lyra smiled, knowing that their bond had awakened something far greater than either of them had imagined. Together they had survived the day. And tomorrow the world outside would see the power of a human's courage and a dragon's wisdom, bound together by trust and hope. The morning light stretched across the mountains, painting the cave in gold and shadows. Lyra sat beside the dragon, feeling the warmth of his scales beneath her fingers. For the first time she could see him fully awake, alert, and strong. The bond they had formed glowed quietly between them, like a thread of light connecting two very different beings. But that morning the wind carried a strange sound, sharp and low, that made Lyra's stomach twist with fear. The dragon stiffened, ears flicking to catch every echo in the mountains. His golden eyes narrowed and a low rumble vibrated through the cave. Lyra understood immediately. Something was coming. Not a human, not a storm, another dragon or perhaps a group. She had heard stories of dragon clans that roamed the mountains, fierce and proud, and they did not welcome intruders. "Are they here?" she whispered. The dragon's head turned toward the entrance, muscles coiled like springs ready to strike. He let out a long, deep growl that shook the rocks around them. The sound was a warning, a challenge, and a call. Lyra felt her heart race, but she did not step back. She knew the dragon needed her trust as much as she needed his strength. Minutes later, shadows appeared on the ridge outside the cave. Lyra squinted and her heart sank. 3 massive dragons were approaching, their wings slicing through the air like knives. They were larger than any she had imagined, with black scales that glinted in the sunlight and eyes that burned with hunger and pride. One of them roared, a sound that echoed through the mountains, demanding the ancient dragon to step down. The dragon she had sat beside, once weak and fading, rose to his full height. His wings stretched wide, casting a shadow over Lyra. The glow along his scales pulsed brightly as if fueled by the bond they had built. He let out a roar that shook the earth, answering the challenge. Lyra gripped a rock, feeling the power beneath her. She had never felt fear like this, but she also felt something stronger, courage born from trust. The black dragons circled closer, their wings beating the air with force. Lyra climbed carefully onto the ancient dragon's back, holding onto the ridges along his scales. He lowered his neck slightly, allowing her to sit safely. "We face them together," she whispered. The dragon's golden eyes met hers, and she could see understanding. They were partners now, bound by trust and courage. The first black dragon swooped down, claws extended. The ancient dragon met it head-on, breathing fire that lit the mountainside. Lyra held tight, feeling the heat but also the strength of the dragon beneath her. He moved with precision, using his long tail to knock one of the attackers sideways. She realized that he was not just strong, he was clever. Every move was calculated, every roar a command of the battlefield. Lyra shouted encouragements, not knowing if the dragon could understand her words, but believing that her voice mattered. "You can do it. Be brave." Her words carried hope, and she could feel the bond between them strengthen with every moment. The ancient dragon's fire lit the sky, and the black dragons hesitated, surprised by the strength of one they expected to be weak. The fight was intense. The black dragons attacked from above and the sides, using their speed and size to try and overwhelm him. But the ancient dragon was clever. He rolled to the side, using his wings to create gusts that knocked the attackers off balance. Lyra shouted, pointing out the weak spots she noticed. Together they became a team, human intelligence guiding dragon strength. At one point, a black dragon lunged directly at Lyra. The ancient dragon reacted instantly, spinning and knocking it away with his tail. Lyra clung tightly, heart pounding, but she realized how much he trusted her and how much she trusted him. It was not just a battle, it was a dance of life where courage, wisdom, and trust determined survival. After a long struggle, the black dragons began to retreat. They had underestimated the ancient dragon, his renewed strength, and the human who had taught him to trust again. The final roar of the retreating dragons echoed across the mountains, leaving silence behind. The cave and ridge were empty once more, except for the ancient dragon and Lyra, standing together, victorious but exhausted. Lyra slid carefully from his back and placed her hands on his snout. "We did it," she said softly. The dragon's golden eyes softened, and he lowered his massive head, almost bowing to her. She smiled, realizing that they had faced something terrifying and survived because of their bond. Strength alone would not have been enough. Trust and courage had won the day. The wind stirred, carrying distant sounds of the valley below. Lyra looked down and saw her village far away, safe for now. She thought of the stories she had told the dragon, the tales of bravery, kindness, and hope. It had worked, not just to heal him but to give him the will to fight again. And now their bond had protected both of them. That night, the dragon lay down beside her, no longer weak, no longer afraid. His breathing was calm, steady, and full of life. Lyra leaned against his scales, feeling warmth and strength. They were partners in every sense, connected by courage, trust, and understanding. The bond was no longer just between them, It was a force that could face any threat, dragon or otherwise. Lyra thought of the black dragons, fierce and proud, but she knew this was only the beginning. The mountains held many dangers and other creatures might come. But together they could face anything. The ancient dragon, once dying and alone, now had a human companion who had taught him trust and hope. And Lyra had a dragon who would protect her and the mountains, not out of fear but out of loyalty and bond. The stars shone above the mountains, and the cave glowed faintly with the dragon's energy. Lyra whispered stories of courage once more, soft and gentle, letting the bond strengthen through the night. The dragon rumbled softly, almost like a purr of contentment. The ancient threat had been faced and they had survived. But more importantly, they had grown stronger together, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. For the first time in centuries, the dragon's roar was not just a warning, it was a song of life, strength, and connection. And Lyra knew in her heart that this was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the dragon but for humans and dragons alike. They had faced an ancient threat and they had won, not with fear but with courage, intelligence, and trust. As the night deepened, the dragon shifted slightly, wrapping one massive wing around Lyra, protecting her from the cold. She felt safe and alive, more alive than she had ever felt. She whispered to him once more, "We are together, and together we are strong. Nothing can break this bond." The dragon rumbled, a deep, steady sound that promised he agreed. Outside, the mountains remained silent, watching over them. Inside, a human girl and an ancient dragon had faced danger, survived, and strengthened a bond that would change their world forever. The morning sun spread its golden light over the mountains, painting the peaks and valleys with warmth. Lyra sat on a smooth rock near the dragon, watching him stretch his massive wings. He was fully awake now, stronger than he had been in centuries. The glow along his scales pulsed with life, steady and bright. Their bond, born of courage and trust, had grown into something unbreakable. "Today is a new day," Lyra whispered, brushing her hand along his snout. "A day for us and for the world outside." The dragon tilted his head and rumbled softly. It was a sound of understanding, of agreement. Together they climbed to the cave entrance, looking out over the valley below. The village was small but lively, and smoke rose from the chimneys. Lyra thought of the villagers and the stories she had told the dragon. She realized that their bond could change not only their lives but the lives of everyone around them. Suddenly movement caught her eye. Other dragons, curious and cautious, approached from the distant ridges. Lyra's heart leapt. The dragon stiffened, golden eyes narrowing. But instead of attacking, they hovered at a distance, watching as if sensing the power of the bond he now shared with a human. Lyra understood that the ancient dragon had become a bridge between two worlds, humans and dragons. "You are not alone anymore," she whispered. The dragon's wings twitched in response. He lowered himself, letting the other dragons approach slowly. There was tension in the air but also curiosity. The black dragons that had threatened them before had been driven back. Now these dragons were watching, deciding whether to accept this change or challenge it. Lyra climbed carefully onto the dragon's back. "Let's show them," she said softly. "Let's show them what trust can do." With a powerful beat of his wings, the dragon took off into the sky. Lyra held tight, feeling the wind rush past her face. The other dragons followed, circling and observing, hesitant but intrigued. Lyra spoke softly to the dragon as they flew, telling him stories of humans who had faced challenges and worked together to create peace. Each word seemed to flow into him, strengthening his resolve and the light along his scales. Below them, the mountains stretched endlessly, filled with forests, rivers, and hidden valleys. Lyra realized that humans and dragons had always lived in the same world, but fear and misunderstanding had kept them apart. Now, through trust and courage, that distance could end. The dragon roared, a deep, powerful sound that echoed across the mountains. It was not a roar of anger but of life, strength, and hope. The other dragons watched and listened. Slowly they began to land near him, circling more closely. Lyra understood that this was their way of accepting him, acknowledging the change. She whispered, "See? You can teach them not with fire but with trust." The dragon's eyes glowed brighter and he lowered his massive head, allowing her to touch his scales. Together, they landed in a large clearing where the other dragons gathered. Lyra stepped off carefully, standing beside the ancient dragon. He rumbled softly, protective yet calm. The other dragons sniffed, examined, and shifted their massive bodies. Then one by one they bowed their heads slightly. It was a gesture of respect, something rare among dragons. Lyra's heart swelled with hope. The ancient dragon had not only survived but had become a leader, showing that strength combined with trust and courage could change even the oldest of hearts. Lyra spoke to the dragons in her soft human voice, telling them stories of humans who had helped each other, who had been brave and kind despite their small size. She spoke of her village, of friends, of dreams that seemed impossible. Slowly the dragons listened, not with understanding of the words, but with understanding of the feeling, the hope, and the courage behind them. The sun climbed higher, warming the valley. The dragon beside her stretched his wings and turned to look at her, golden eyes full of pride and trust. Lyra smiled. "We have started something new," she said. "A future where humans and dragons can work together, protect each other, and live in peace." The other dragons began to move, flying gracefully above the valley, testing the winds and each other. Lyra realized that this was the start of something bigger than herself, bigger than even the ancient dragon. It was a new world where courage, trust, and understanding could unite species that had once feared each other. Hours passed as the dragons explored the valley, and Lyra told more stories, teaching them about humans, their small acts of bravery, and their hopes for the future. The ancient dragon listened closely, then roared once more, a call of life, strength, and unity. The other dragons responded with their own roars, not in anger but in recognition and harmony. Lyra climbed back onto the dragon's back as evening fell. The sky glowed with orange and pink, reflecting on the scales of the dragons below. The valley seemed alive not just with nature but with the promise of a new future. Lyra held onto the dragon, feeling the strength beneath her, and whispered stories of courage and hope, knowing that they would echo through the mountains, shaping the world. As night descended, the dragons returned to the caves and cliffs, but the bond between Lyra and the ancient dragon remained strong. They had faced death, danger, and doubt. They had survived and they had changed the future. The dragon curled around Lyra protectively, and she rested against his scales, feeling safe and alive. "I think they will understand," she whispered. "And soon more will join us. Humans and dragons can live together." The dragon rumbled, a deep, steady sound like agreement. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of life beneath her, knowing that this was only the beginning. They had faced the darkness and danger, and now they were ready to bring light and hope to the world. Stars appeared above, twinkling like tiny sparks of fire in the night sky. Lyra whispered one last story before sleep claimed her, a story of hope, bravery, and friendship. The dragon listened, his warm breath brushing against her cheek. Together they had started a new chapter, a new world where courage and trust could overcome fear and strength. The mountains were silent, but the bond between a human girl and an ancient dragon glowed brightly, a light that would guide the future. And in that light the world felt safer, fuller, and alive with endless possibilities. For the first time in centuries the ancient dragon roared not as a warning, but as a promise that a human's courage and a dragon's strength together could change the fate of their world. And Lyra, small but brave, knew that the future had begun.